The night was heavy, the air cold and sharp. The streets almost empty except for broken lamps that flickered with a weak yellow glow. In the corner of a narrow alley, a figure lay curled on the ground, her breathing shallow, her body thin and weak like a dying shadow. She was an alien woman, once proud, but now nothing more than a discarded soul, her skin pale from hunger, her eyes dull from pain. For days she had not eaten. For weeks she had not felt kindness. Her ribs showed with every breath and her hands trembled as she tried to move. The city around her did not care. Footsteps echoed in the distance. Voices passed near the alley, but no one stopped. No one looked down at the broken woman lying on the cold stone. She could hear them laugh, she could hear them whisper, but she knew they would not help. To them she was already dead, worthless, forgotten. Her lips cracked as she whispered to herself, "Maybe this is the end. Maybe tonight I will take my last breath." Her chest rose slowly, painfully. Each inhale like fire burning through her lungs, each exhale a surrender. She thought of her past, of the time when she had family, when she had hope. But those memories were distant now. Blurred like smoke in the wind, her people had turned away from her, called her weak, unfit, a burden. She had tried to survive. She had begged for food, begged for mercy, but no one had answered. Every door had closed. Every hand had pushed her away until she no longer believed in tomorrow. Rain began to fall, cold drops hitting her face, sliding down her cheeks like tears. She could not cry anymore. Her body shivered, her fingers stiff. She tried to curl tighter, as if to hide from the world. But there was no escape, no comfort. Just darkness waiting to take her. She closed her eyes slowly, ready to leave, ready to let go. Her heart whispered that it was time, that death would be kinder than life had ever been. The sound of boots echoed steady and strong, coming closer through the rain. She did not open her eyes. She thought it was just another stranger who would pass, who would not care. The steps stopped beside her. She felt a shadow over her face, blocking the weak light from the lamp above. A voice spoke deep and calm, not mocking, not cruel, just human. "Are you alive?" the voice asked. Her lips trembled. But no words came, only a faint breath. The stranger knelt down. She could hear the sound of cloth brushing against the wet ground. A hand touched her shoulder, warm even in the cold rain, steady and strong. She flinched, expecting pain, expecting to be shoved aside like always. But the hand did not hurt her, it stayed gentle. The voice came again, this time softer. "Don't give up. I'm here." She opened her eyes weakly, her vision blurred, and through the haze she saw a human face, a man with tired eyes, but eyes that held something she had not seen in years. Concern. In his hand was a small flask. He lifted it to her lips, and she felt the touch of water. At first she turned away, suspicious, afraid, but thirst was stronger than fear. She drank slowly, drops running down her chin, each sip giving her strength she thought was gone forever. The human looked at her, studying her fragile body, and for a moment he said nothing. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "No one deserves to die like this." She wanted to ask him why he cared, why he had stopped, but her voice was gone. She only managed to breathe out a broken sound, her eyes filling with tears that mixed with the rain. The man adjusted his coat, taking it off and placing it over her thin frame. It was heavy, warm, and smelled of smoke and dust. But to her it felt like the first comfort she had known in forever. Her body trembled, not from cold this time, but from disbelief. Why would a human, a stranger, choose to help her when her own kind had abandoned her? Her chest rose again, the air coming a little easier now. Her heart, once ready to stop, beat harder, refusing to let go. The darkness that was pulling her slowly stepped back, replaced by a spark. Small but real, she stared at him, too weak to speak, but in her eyes was a silent question. Why the man gave no answer, not yet, he only held her steady. Helping her sit up, he said again, "You're not dying tonight," his voice calm but firm. And in that moment, as the rain fell harder, she realized something she had forgotten long ago. Even in the deepest darkness, a hand can still reach down and pull someone back. She had been ready to take her last breath, but now, with this human beside her, she felt the faintest whisper of life return. Her story was not over yet. The rain did not stop, it poured harder, beating against the stone streets, washing dirt into small streams that ran down the alley. The alien woman sat weakly, her thin frame trembling under the weight of the human's coat. Her breaths uneven, shallow, but no longer fading. The human knelt beside her, his hair damp, his shoulders wet, yet his eyes steady. fixed on her as if she was the only thing that mattered in this wide, cruel city. She had no strength to move. Her legs stiff, her body broken from hunger and pain. She thought he might leave her like all others before him. But instead, he reached out his hand, open, waiting, patient, as if he had all the time in the world. She stared at that hand, suspicious, her mind whispering warnings, every memory reminding her of betrayal, of cruelty, of empty promises. Why would anyone help her? Why would a human care? When even her own kind had left her to die, the human did not rush. He simply kept his hand there, steady and firm. "Come with me," he said quietly. His voice not commanding but gentle, like a calm river flowing. Her lips parted, a weak sound escaped, almost a whisper. "Why?" But he only answered with silence, a silence that felt stronger than 1,000 words. At last, with trembling fingers, she reached out, her hand so small and fragile compared to his, her skin cold like ice, and when their hands touched, she felt warmth spread through her veins, a warmth that felt unreal. He helped her to her feet slowly, carefully. As if she were made of glass, her legs wobbled, unable to carry her weight, but he held her steady, his arms supporting her like a pillar. Every step was a battle, her breath ragged, yet he did not let go. With each faltering step, his voice was there, soft and firm. "You can do this, keep moving." The alley stretched endless in her mind, every shadow watching, every whisper in the dark reminding her of shame. She imagined cruel faces, mocking eyes, the sound of laughter when she had once begged for help. But with the human beside her, she felt those shadows step back. Afraid of the fire in his stride, they reached the end of the alley. The city lights brighter, the streets wider, and still he did not let go of her hand. The city was awake even in the rain. Merchants closed their shops. Travelers hurried with cloaks over their heads. Soldiers marched down the far road. Some turned their eyes toward the strange pair, a weak alien woman leaning on a human, but most looked away, uninterested. Yet a few eyes lingered, suspicious, some filled with disgust, others with curiosity. She lowered her head in shame, wanting to disappear. But the human tightened his grip as if telling her silently, "Stand, don't hide." They reached a small wooden door at the corner of a quiet street. The human pushed it open, guiding her inside, and warmth hit her instantly, the heat of a small fire crackling in the hearth. The room was simple, only a bed, a table, and some old tools scattered across the shelves. But to her it felt like another world, a place far away from the cold streets where she had been ready to die. He helped her sit on the bed, adjusting the coat over her thin shoulders. She looked around with wide eyes, confusion and fear twisting inside her chest. Her lips trembled as she asked again, "Why?" This time he looked at her, his face lit by the fire, his voice steady. "Because you're alive, and that matters." Her throat tightened. Her eyes burned. She had not heard such words in years. To her people, she had been a burden, a weight, a mistake. To strangers, she had been nothing, invisible trash on the street. But here was a human telling her she mattered, not with grand speeches, but with actions, with water, with warmth, with a hand that refused to let her fall. He brought a small bowl, steam rising from it, the smell of broth filling the room. Her hand shook as she reached for it, spilling some on her fingers. But he guided it to her lips. The taste was simple, salty, warm. But to her, it was a feast greater than anything she could imagine. Tears ran down her cheeks as she drank slowly, each mouthful pulling her back from the edge of death. When the bowl was empty, she sank back against the bed, weak but no longer fading, her eyes closed. But not in surrender this time, in rest and fragile peace. The human sat nearby, silent, watching, making sure she would not slip away. And as the firelight danced on the walls, she whispered so faint he almost did not hear, "I was ready to die." But the human's eyes softened, his voice calm. "Not anymore." That night, as rain continued to fall outside, the alien woman slept. And for the first time in years, she did not dream of death. She dreamed of a hand that reached for her in the dark, a stranger's hand that pulled her back from the edge, the hand of a human who refused to let her go. The fire burned low in the small room, its glow soft and warm, shadows dancing on the wooden walls like silent ghosts. The alien woman lay on the bed, her thin body wrapped in the human's coat, her breathing steadier now, though every breath carried the memory of her pain. The human sat nearby, quiet, his eyes never leaving her, as if guarding her from a world that had already tried to bury her alive. Hours passed slowly, rain still tapping against the window. The city outside alive with distant voices and marching boots, but inside the room it was different, safe. Though she could not understand why, she turned her face away, staring at the wall, afraid of the silence, afraid of his kindness, afraid of what memories it awakened in her heart. Her mind wandered, pulled into the shadows of her past. She remembered the first time her people had called her weak, a child unable to run as fast as the others, a girl who fell often, who tired quickly. The whispers had started then, soft but sharp. She will never survive. She is a burden. Her parents had tried at first. They gave her food, they gave her care, but as she grew, and her weakness grew with her, the looks in their eyes changed. It was no longer love, it was disappointment, shame, and finally, rejection. Her throat tightened, her lips trembling as silent tears slid down her cheeks. The human noticed, leaning closer but not speaking. He did not touch her this time, he did not push, he only waited, as if giving her the choice to share or to stay silent. Her voice was weak, shaking like broken glass. They left me, she whispered, her words almost drowned by the crackle of the fire. The human leaned forward, listening, his expression calm. Not shocked, not pitying, only listening. They said I was worthless, they said I would bring shame. They pushed me out into the streets and no one wanted me. Her body shook harder, her hands clutching the coat around her as if it could shield her from memories. I begged them to take me back. I begged others for food, but they laughed, they spat at me. They called me less than dirt, her voice broke, her body curling as sobs escaped her throat, raw and painful. The human moved then, his hand resting lightly on the edge of the bed. Close but not forcing. Let it out, he said softly. His voice steady like the earth under her feet, and she did. The tears she had buried for years finally rising, pouring down her face like the rain outside. When her sobs slowed, she looked at him through blurry eyes. Why are you here? Why do you care? When no one else ever did. The human's gaze did not waver, his eyes holding hers. Because no one deserves to be forgotten, he answered simply. His words hit her heart like a spark, painful and yet warm. She turned her face again, staring at the fire. Her mind still trapped in shadows, she remembered being sold. Her body used for labor until it broke. She remembered nights when she was chained, her captors laughing, throwing scraps of food at her as if feeding an animal. She remembered crawling, desperate for water. While voices mocked her weakness, she remembered finally being tossed aside. Left in the cold streets like trash, every scar on her body told a story, and each story was written in cruelty. Her hands covered her face as she whispered, I am nothing, I was nothing. Maybe I should have died. The human's voice came firm this time, louder than the crackling fire. No, he said, his tone carrying a weight that silenced the room. You are alive, and that means you are not nothing. She shook her head, unwilling to believe, unwilling to hope. But his words lingered, echoing deep inside, fighting against the chains of her past. He stood and walked to the shelf. Pulling out a small cloth, he returned to her side, gently wiping her tears, careful, as if afraid she would shatter. His touch was steady, not pitying, not claiming, simply human. She looked at him with wide eyes, confused, her heart torn between disbelief and the longing for it to be real. The firelight cast his face in shadows, but his eyes glowed with quiet strength. Your past is cruel, but it does not end you, he said. She stared, silence filling the space between them, and slowly, painfully, she whispered, Then what am I? The human paused, then answered, Someone who still has tomorrow. Her chest tightened, her breath caught, and for a moment she felt the chains of her memories loosen, only slightly but enough to breathe. She closed her eyes, not to surrender but to rest, to let his words sink into the cracks of her broken heart. The fire burned low, the shadows still whispering around her. But now she was not alone for the first time. When she looked into the darkness of her past, she also saw a hand, steady and warm, reaching into her shadows, refusing to let her fall again. That night she dreamed, but not of pain. She dreamed of a small light in the distance, faint but real, guiding her through the ruins of her memories. And when she opened her eyes in the dim morning light, her first thought was not of death, but of the human who had given her reason to live another day. Morning came quietly. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets outside damp and shining under a pale sky. Inside the small room, the fire had burned low, only a faint glow of embers left. The alien woman stirred on the bed, her body stiff, her mind heavy with memories that clung like shadows. But something felt different. The silence was not as cruel as before. Her chest rose with slow breaths, not of despair this time, but of survival. The human was already awake, sitting near the table, repairing a tool with steady hands, his movements calm and precise. He looked up when he heard her stir, his eyes meeting hers with quiet warmth. Not pity, not judgment, just presence. She lowered her gaze quickly, unused to such steady kindness, her fingers clutching the edge of the coat that still covered her body. "Drink this," he said, holding out a cup of warm liquid. Steam curling into the air, she hesitated, suspicion flickering in her mind, but hunger and thirst pushed her forward. She accepted the cup with trembling hands. The warmth spread through her chest as she drank, softening the sharp edges of the night before. Her lips parted, whispering a fragile, "Thank you," the words foreign to her own tongue after so many years of silence. The human nodded, not asking for more, not pressing her with questions, and for the first time, she felt safe enough to sit upright. Her body was still weak, every movement slow, but her spirit stirred faintly like a spark in the ashes. The human noticed, his voice calm. "You need to walk again." Her eyes widened in fear. She shook her head quickly. "I can't." But he did not let her answer end there. He stood, extending his hand once more, the same hand that had pulled her from the alley, the same hand that refused to let her die. Her heart pounded, fear battling with longing. She had been beaten when she stumbled before, laughed at when she fell, mocked for every weakness, but the human's voice was steady. "I will not let you fall." Those words pierced through her fear, and with trembling hesitation, she placed her hand in his. He helped her stand, her legs shaking, her body threatening to collapse. But his arm was strong around her, guiding her forward. "Just one step," he whispered, and she obeyed, her bare feet touching the wooden floor. The step was small, painful, but real. Her breath came heavy, but he smiled. "See? You did it." She stared at him, disbelief filling her eyes. No one had ever praised her for something so simple. "Another," he encouraged, and she tried again, this time almost falling, her knees buckling, but his arm caught her steady and unyielding. And he only said, "I told you I will not let you fall." Tears welled in her eyes as she took another shaky step, and another, each one a battle against her broken body and broken heart. Yet with every step she felt a strange warmth inside, a spark she thought had been lost. It was not strength yet, but it was the beginning of it. Hours passed in slow progress, her body trembling, her breaths ragged, but she walked, from the bed to the wall, from the wall to the table. Every stumble was met not with laughter, not with cruelty, but with the human's calm voice and steady hand. When at last she sank back onto the bed, exhausted, her heart was racing, not from despair, but from effort, from living. And for the first time she smiled faintly, a fragile smile, but real. The human saw it, his lips lifting slightly, though he said nothing. But his silence was filled with meaning. More than words could carry. She touched her lips. Surprised by her own smile, it felt strange, like a forgotten song playing again after years of silence. That night, as the fire crackled again, she sat on the bed, no longer lying down like a corpse waiting for death. The human gave her simple food, bread and broth, and she ate slowly. Her hands steadier than before, she looked at him across the table, her voice soft. "Why do you do this? Why for me?" He paused, then answered simply, "Because life matters even when it feels worthless." "It still matters," her eyes filled with tears, but not the tears of despair this time. They were tears of something new, fragile and terrifying, hope. She wiped them quickly, afraid he might see, but he already knew. As she lay down later, staring at the ceiling, her body sore but alive, her heart whispered a thought she had not dared before. Maybe I can live. Maybe I can be more than nothing. And though shadows still lingered, though her past still whispered cruelly, she felt the spark inside her grow warmer. It was not a fire yet, but it was the spark of life, and it refused to die. The days passed slowly. Each morning the alien woman tried to walk again. Each night she slept without dreaming of death. The human kept his promise. He gave her food. He gave her warmth. And most of all, he gave her a hand that never let her fall. But outside their small room, the city whispered. The streets carried voices sharp as knives, and cruel eyes watched every step. One morning, the human guided her through the market, her legs trembling but stronger than before. She wore an old cloak he had given her, the hood pulled low to hide her face, yet she felt every stare like a weight pressing against her back. Merchants paused in their trade. Children pointed and whispered. Soldiers muttered under their breath. She kept her head down, shame burning in her chest, but she could still hear their words. Why does he waste food on her? She should have been left in the alley. She is cursed. Nothing good will come from saving her. The whispers spread like fire, cruel laughter following behind. Her hands shook, her breath quickened. She wanted to turn back, to hide, to disappear. But the human walked beside her, tall, steady, his presence like a shield. When someone stepped too close, mocking her with a sneer, the human's eyes met theirs, calm but unyielding. The mocker faltered, stepping back, muttering under his breath. The alien woman glanced at the human in disbelief. No one had ever defended her. No one had ever stood between her and cruelty. Yet here he was, facing the world's scorn without flinching. They reached a stall. The human bought bread and fruit, handing a piece to her. Her hands trembled as she held it, aware of the eyes watching, waiting to see her stumble. She ate slowly, forcing herself not to shrink away. For a moment, she felt almost normal. Sitting beside him, sharing food as if she belonged. But the laughter returned, sharper this time. 3 figures blocked their path, young men with hard eyes and cruel grins. One of them spat on the ground, glaring at her. This trash should be dead. Why do you carry her like a pet? The alien woman froze, her heart racing, every instinct screaming to run, to hide. The human stepped forward, his voice calm but cold. Move! The men laughed, circling closer, their words dripping with venom. She is nothing. Leave her to us, we will show her what she's worth. The alien woman clutched the cloak tighter, fear choking her. She had faced this before. She had been surrounded, mocked, dragged down, beaten until she could no longer cry. She whispered, "Please, let's go, please." But the human did not back away. His body stood firm, his arms stretched slightly behind him, shielding her. His voice was steady, like stone. She is with me. The market grew quiet, the crowd pausing, watching, waiting. Whispers spread quickly, some eager for a fight, others shaking their heads. The young men laughed again, but their eyes flickered with unease at the human's unwavering stance. One stepped forward, his tone mocking. "You will regret this, human." The human's reply was simple. "No, I will not." Silence stretched, heavy and tense, until finally the men turned away, muttering threats as they disappeared into the crowd. The alien woman sank against the wall, trembling, her eyes filled with tears. She whispered, Why do you risk yourself for me? I am not worth it." The human knelt, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, his voice calm. "Because you are worth it, even if they cannot see it." The words pierced her heart, both painful and healing. She shook her head, still unable to believe. But his eyes held no doubt. As they returned to the small room, she walked closer beside him, her steps slow but determined. For the first time, she felt the faintest courage, a spark born not from her own strength but from his belief in her. That night she lay awake, the cruel whispers echoing in her mind. But so did his words, steady and strong. "You are worth it." The shadows pressed close, reminding her of chains, of mockery, of abandonment. But against those shadows stood the memory of him, his hand steady, his presence unyielding. And though fear still gripped her heart, she clung to that memory, refusing to let it go. Yet outside, the whispers did not end. They grew darker, heavier. Voices spoke in corners, threats sharpened in the alleys. And in the distance, shadows gathered once more, for cruelty does not forgive kindness, and those who hated her life would not allow it to continue in peace. The alien woman did not know yet, but the test of her fragile hope was only beginning. The cruel eyes around them would soon do more than whisper. They would strike, and this time, her life would hang between death and the human who refused to let her fall. The night was thick with silence, the kind that hides danger in every shadow. The alien woman sat close to the fire, her hands wrapped in the human's coat, her eyes heavy, but her mind restless. All day the cruel whispers had followed them, and though the human had stood strong, she could not shake the feeling that something darker was coming. The human sat near the window, sharpening a small blade, his face calm, but his eyes alert. He had heard the voices too, the threats thrown in the market, the anger of those who could not stand to see her alive. He knew they would not stop with words. And he was right. The sound came first. A knock against the door, slow and deliberate. Her body froze, fear rushing back like a flood, her heart beating so fast she could hardly breathe. The human raised his hand, signaling her to stay quiet, then moved carefully, placing the blade at his side. The knock came again, louder, followed by rough voices outside. "We know she's in there," one shouted. "Open the door, human. Give her to us and we'll let you live." Her blood turned to ice, her hands shaking as she whispered, "They've come for me." She wanted to hide, to run, but her legs would not move. She could only stare at the door as if it were already opening to swallow her. The human's voice cut through her panic, steady and calm. "Stay behind me." He stepped forward, opening the door just enough to see the figures outside. There were 5 of them, their faces hard, their hands holding crude weapons, their eyes burning with hatred. The leader sneered, "Why do you protect trash? She doesn't deserve life." The human's answer was sharp, "Leave now." The men laughed, the sound cruel and mocking. "You think you can stop us, 1 human against 5? The leader spat. The human's grip tightened on his blade, his body steady, his eyes unflinching. "You'll have to go through me," he said. The air grew tense. The men exchanged glances, then without warning, they surged forward. The door burst open and chaos filled the room. The alien woman screamed, stumbling back against the wall, her body frozen between terror and disbelief. The human moved like a storm, his blade flashing, his fists striking, his body refusing to yield. The clash was brutal, metal against wood, fists against flesh, the sound of struggle echoing through the small room. He fought with everything he had, each strike fueled not by anger, but by determination. 1 man fell, clutching his arm, another staggered back with blood on his face, but more pressed in, their eyes wild with hate, their weapons raised high. The alien woman's heart pounded. She wanted to run, but her legs refused. She wanted to fight, but her body shook too hard. Tears filled her eyes as she watched him take blows meant for her, his body bruised, his blood staining the floor. Why, she thought, why does he fight for me? And then it struck her. Because no one ever had. Because in this cruel world, he was the only one who chose her life over his own. One of the attackers raised a heavy club. Aiming for the human's head, her body moved before her mind. She cried out, "No." Grabbing the nearest object, a piece of broken wood from the table, she swung with all her strength. The blow was weak compared to theirs, but it startled the attacker long enough for the human to strike him down. Her chest heaved, her arms trembling, but for the first time in her life she had stood between death and someone else. The human looked at her. Even in the chaos his eyes softened, pride flickering for just a second. Then he turned back to the fight, striking the last attacker with fierce resolve. At last the men staggered back, bloodied and broken, their leader clutching his side, snarling, "This isn't over," before fleeing into the night. Silence fell heavy in the room, broken only by the sound of their breathing. The alien woman sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face, her body shaking with exhaustion. The human leaned against the wall, his chest rising and falling heavily, blood running down his arm. She crawled to him, her hands trembling as she touched his wounds, her voice breaking. "You're hurt. Because of me, you're hurt." He looked at her, his voice firm even through pain. "You are alive. That's what matters." Her heart shattered and healed all at once, tears dripping onto his hands. She whispered, "I was ready to die. I was nothing but you. You stood for me. You fought for me." The human's hand rose weakly, brushing away her tears, his voice soft. "Because you are worth fighting for." Her sobs filled the room, not of despair this time, but of something new, something she could not yet name, She held his hand tightly as if afraid he would slip away, and for the first time in her life, she felt the truth sink deep into her heart. Between death and life, someone had chosen her. The fire crackled weakly, the room a mess of broken wood and blood, but in that broken place something new had been born. Not just survival, not just hope, but the beginning of a bond stronger than fear, stronger than cruelty. And though danger still lurked in the shadows outside, she knew one thing clearly. She was no longer alone. The night of violence passed, but its scars remained in the small room. Broken wood lay scattered across the floor. Blood stained the walls and the smell of smoke clung to the air. The alien woman sat beside the human, her hands pressed against the bandages she had wrapped around his wounds. Her face pale with worry, he rested against the bed frame, his eyes half closed, his breath uneven, yet his expression calm. She had never cared for anyone before. No one had given her the chance, but now, as she pressed her trembling hands against his bleeding arm, her heart ached in a way she did not understand. She whispered, voice breaking, "Why did you do this? Why risk everything for me?" The human opened his eyes slowly, meeting hers with steady calm. "Because you deserve to live," he answered, simple and firm. Her chest tightened, tears spilling down her face. She shook her head. "No one ever said that to me. No one ever believed it," his voice softened. "Then let this be the first time." Her hands shook harder, her tears falling onto his skin, mixing with the dirt and blood. She whispered, "I was ready to die, but you gave me another life." The days that followed were quiet but heavy. The attackers had fled, but their words lingered like poison in the city's air. She knew they might return, stronger, angrier, and yet something inside her had changed. She no longer thought only of death. She no longer waited for the end. Every morning she rose, weak but determined, walking across the room with steadier steps. The human watched her, guiding her, his presence unshaken even through pain. He taught her to tend the fire, to prepare food, to mend clothes, simple tasks, but to her they felt like learning how to live all over again. Each time she stumbled, he was there, his hand steady, his words calm, reminding her she was not alone. The cruel eyes of the city did not vanish. When they went to the market, whispers still followed. Some cruel, some curious, but she no longer hid her face completely. She walked a little taller, her hood lowered just enough for the world to see she still lived. The whispers stung, but she held on to his words. "You are worth it." And those words became a shield stronger than any cloak. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of fire, she stood outside the small home, her steps slow but steady, her body no longer collapsing under its own weight. The human stepped beside her, his arm still bandaged but his strength returning. They looked out at the street together, silent for a while, until she spoke, her voice quiet. "Do you think I can change? Do you think I can be more than what they say I am?" He turned to her, his gaze firm. "You already are." Her throat tightened, her hands clutching the coat he had once placed over her dying body. That coat was no longer just cloth, it was proof that someone had chosen to see her. Someone had chosen to fight for her, and now she wanted to fight for herself too. That night, as they sat by the fire, she finally told him everything. Her family's rejection, the chains, the hunger, the cruelty that had buried her hope. Her voice cracked many times, tears falling, but she did not stop. Because for the first time, someone was listening. The human did not interrupt, he did not pity, he simply listened. And when her story ended, he said only one thing. "You survived all of that and you are still here. That makes you stronger than they will ever be." Her heart trembled, her breath shaking, but she believed him. For the first time in her life, she believed. Days turned to weeks. Her body healed, her steps grew stronger, her laughter returned in small, fragile bursts. The shadows of her past still followed, but they no longer crushed her completely. She had found something greater than survival. She had found a reason to live. One morning, she stood in front of the small, cracked mirror by the wall, staring at her reflection. Her face was still thin, her scars still visible, yet her eyes looked different, brighter, alive. She touched the glass softly, whispering to herself, "I am not nothing." The human's voice came from behind her, steady as ever. "No, you are not." She turned, tears in her eyes. But this time they were not tears of despair. They were tears of rebirth. She stepped closer, her voice soft. "I thought my life was over. I thought I had taken my last breath. But you You gave me a second life. The human shook his head gently. His words simple. No, you chose to live. I only helped you see it. Her heart swelled. And for the first time she smiled without fear. A smile full of fragile hope. A smile that belonged not to a dying woman, but to someone reborn. The fire crackled. The city outside still harsh, but inside that small room, something had changed forever. She was no longer ready to die. She was ready to live, and beside her the human who had refused to let her go. She would walk into a future that was hers, not as nothing, not as forgotten, but as someone who had been given a second life.